I just had a big brain moment, and I think I connected something so perfectly. I'm so excited. I'm just going to read these couple blurbs, and then I'll explain myself, and then I'll read a couple more. So this is Crescent City, and it says, no statues ever adorned Urd's temple. No depiction of the goddess had ever been made. Fate took too many forms to capture in one figure. And they're talking about how there's like a black stone altar, and when they first got there, it was like in darkness and shadow and all of that. And then there's another whole section after like a fight with the rebels, and it says, a growl came from behind him, and Hunt whirled to the back of the throne. That's Baxian, by the way. It wasn't solid stone at all, but an open doorway leading into a narrow stairwell. And then Baxian says, I researched the history of this temple, found rumors about the door hidden in the throne. It's what took me some time, finding the tunnel entrance in. Some priestess must have used it recently, though. Her scent was all over the alley and fake wall that leads in here. Now, I think it's Meryl. Because everyone knows that Meryl's suspicious. Meryl's a priestess. Meryl is descended from the Lord of the Western Wind, Rabath, and she works for Clotho. Now, Clotho in mythology, as I've said in other theories, is the spinner of fate. And I always believed that she was the same person as she was in mythology, mostly because of Asriel and Gwen stuff. But I do think she is the spinner of fate. I do think that she is the goddess Urd, who, as we just read, is fate herself. Now, it says Clotho was the youngest goddess of the three fates of the Mirai. She had two sisters, which reminds me of two things. First, the Archeron sisters, obviously. And second, the three-headed goddess, the Mother, the Maiden, and the Crone, which will probably come into play. But also, her power enabled her not only to choose who was born, but also to decide when deities or mortals, so I'm assuming that includes everything in between, were meant to be saved or put to death. For example, Clotho resurrected Pelops when his father killed him. So I find it funny that Nesta at that point was death herself, and Clotho was the spinner of fate. And I have a whole theory that the golden threads between Nesta and Cassian are not a mate bond, but death bonds. Every time that Cassian was spared by death. And I wonder if Clotho is not really using her, but if Nesta is a conduit to Clotho's fate powers by being death. Like that string on the harp and the quote that says, even death bows to that string. So I'm guessing, this is just another theory off of a theory, but I'm guessing the original 3 Dread Trove items were Clotho's and her 2 sisters of fates. I think the harp was Clotho's. And she's, as I said, I think she's using Nesta as a conduit. I don't think Cassian was supposed to die yet, but that he will, unfortunately. And that was that. But back to the whole point of this video. As it said, she can also resurrect people, which makes her a necromancer like Hypaxia. In the next book, CC3, House of Flame and Shadow, necromancers are in the House of Flame and Shadow. Somebody is going to die, somebody's going to be brought back, and somebody's not going to be brought back. Personally, I feel like it's going to be between either Cassian and Hunt or Cassian and Rune, and Cassian's going to be on the short end of the stick here. We know that Meryl is a close friend of Clotho, which means she has to know she's the goddess of fate. And who else would serve a goddess of fate other than someone descended from, like, a lord or another god, like Meryl? We know how, like, tough she is and how she likes to show off her power and everything. So it makes sense that she would be close friends with Clotho. I'm going to read a couple more quotes, and then I'll try to explain them. These ones are from Acotar. It says, Clotho, the priestess, that's when they first meet her, patiently waited a few steps behind us, her face still in shadow. When they showed up to the temple, like I said, the altar was cloaked in shadow. How did you know that we were in trouble? Feyre asked her. Clotho, Rhys said. There's a spelled bell inside the library. She rang it and it went out to all of us. Cassian got there first. So how did you know that we were in trouble? Clotho. Because she's fate. She knows their fates. She knows how to spin fate. How to make things happen and prevent things from happening. We see this as a pattern in all of Acotar, since I've just gathered all these quotes and everything. We have Clotho sat in silence as if she'd seen the thoughts blare through Nesta, as if she knew how often the memory of that day in Hybern woke her. That's very fate-ish to me, as well. Erd herself.
This was just not subtle, Sarah. LOL.
Gwen smiled again, her eyes lighting with pride. Some of the songs you'll hear are so ancient they predate the written word. Some of them are so old we didn't even have them in Sangraba. Clotho found them in books shelved below level 7. Now, this goes back to Meryl. When we first meet Meryl, Clotho says that Gwen works for her, that she's Clotho's right hand, and that she's a fiercely demanding scholar. And then Gwen says, I was supposed to deliver Volume 7 of The Great War to Meryl yesterday, along with a stack of other books. The Great War? Like the one that's coming up between worlds? And let's not forget that Nesta had asked Gwen to ask Meryl about the Dread Trove. Morning, Nesta said, falling into step with her. Anything on the trove? Gwen shook her head. She still wore her robes, though she'd been taken to tying back her hair in a tight braid. I even asked Meryl last night. She broke through the glamour, but beyond a few mentions in old texts, she couldn't find anything more than what you already know. Not a hint about when or where they were lost or who lost them. We can't even uncover who last possessed them, since it's information that goes back at least 10,000 years. Now, if Clotho is fate and Meryl's her right hand, Clotho probably told her not to tell them anything, especially because we know that the horn, the 4th Dread Trove, is tattooed on Bryce's back. So everything had to fall into place and work perfectly to get Bryce into Prythian. And then we also have the Valkyrie history and training were mostly oral, so any accounts we have are through whatever passing historians or philosophers or tradespeople wrote down. It's just bits and pieces scattered in various books, no primary sources beyond a few precious scrolls. Meryl got it into her head years ago to begin compiling all of it into one volume, their history, their training techniques. Clotho's also the one that probably convinced Gwen to sign up for Valkyrie training. I think that's worth noting. Now, let's not forget about the Dread Trove thing I just said, right? So it's curious how Clotho was the one that found those ancient songs to sing at that particular temple celebration that Gwen had asked Nesta to come to. And what happens to Nesta when she's at that celebration, and specifically when those songs are sang? She gets lured to the harp, right? Clotho and Meryl are both there. It says, the song ended and more prayers and words flowed from Meryl, Clotho silent beside her. Then another song started, this one merrier and faster than the others, which is the one that lures Nesta to the harp. So, Clotho is definitely the spinner of fate. Meryl is definitely her world-walking right hand. And that's whose scent was in Fate's temple in Midgard, because it's a temple dedicated to Clotho, Erd/Fate herself. And as for Meryl, we also have this little tidbit, which is just random, but it was a little curious to me. Meryl made even more look drab, hair white and fresh as snow, contrasted against the light brown of her skin, and eyes the color of a twilight sky, blinked once, twice. That reminds me of like stars, supernova, definitely World Walker-ish, as if focusing on the here and now and not whatever work she'd been doing. So I wonder if she just came back from Midgard, and I'm sure it takes a little bit of adjusting because Midgard is so modern and Prythian is so not. So she probably goes from like someone's study with a lot of tech and computers and all of this stuff, and then she comes back to Prithian in the library, and like you just have scrolls and books and whatever you can get your hands on. It also says, Meryl's remarkable eyes narrowed. She looked as young as Nesta, yet an ornery sort of energy buzzed around her. So again, I think she's the daughter of a god. Lord of the Western Wind. It's probably God of the Western Wind. And she's just, using her cover story. There's no coincidences, Sarah J. Maas. I'm on to you. We also have Meryl saying, do you not know who I am, girl? The wind whispers to me even here under so much stone. It finds its way in through the cracks and murmurs the goings-on of the world in my ear. Which world, Meryl? Which world? And then we have, so that ancient music lured Nesta to the harp, right? And Amren says about the harp can open any door, physical or otherwise, some say between worlds. I'm wondering if Clotho found the harp or had the harp and uses it to send Meryl between worlds if she isn't a world walker herself. And that's how she was able to lure Nesta to it. It can open any door, even between worlds. And then we have Nesta asking Gwen, what is Meryl researching anyway? Lots of things. Meryl's brilliant, horrible but brilliant. When she first came here, she was obsessed with the theories regarding the existence of different realms, different worlds, living on top of each other without even knowing it. Whether there is merely one existence, our existence, or if it might be possible for worlds to overlap, occupying the same space, but separated by time, and a whole bunch of other things I can't even begin to explain to you because I barely understand them myself. Some philosophers believe there are 11 worlds like that, and some believe that there are as many as 26. The last one being time itself. We know that there's 26 strings on the harp. We know that the harp can open doors between worlds. And we also know that the last string on the harp, death bows to it. So, this is going to be very interesting. I think I cracked the code. What do you guys think? The minute Clotho came into play, I was like, Spinner of Fate. Then she started doing all this sketch shit. I was like, she has to be the same Clotho. She has to be the same Clotho. There's no other explanation. And I think that she just doesn't speak because either Fate isn't allowed to speak, and she found a way around it using a pen and a pencil, or pen and pad, and then, maybe she glamored herself to look that way, to get close to the priestesses. And I think she chose the library because she knew that Nesta would end up at the library. And as we know, Nesta is blessed by the mother, who may or may not be Clotho/Erd/Fate herself. We don't know yet. But funny that the mother whispered on the wind. We know it's not Meryl because Meryl hates Nesta. But I wouldn't put it past it to be Clotho as well. But yeah, we know that Nesta is connected to Bryce because her bargain tattoo was the 8-pointed star. And obviously, Bryce has the 8-pointed star in her chest. Bryce is said to have the original Starborn Queen's power. The original Starborn Queen, Thea, I don't know, maybe she is the mother, maybe she descended from the mother. I'm not really sure on that front yet. But at the very least, I know that Clotho is Clotho and Meryl is her right hand. And Meryl's going between worlds for her. Doing some shady shit to get Bryce to Prithian. And not for nothing, but who do we know that has a model of all of the worlds in their studies? The Autumn King and Rhysand. They know more than they ever told anyone. And I will stand firm in thinking that Rhys is the Prince of the Pit, and I will stand firm that the Autumn King is allying with the princes because the princes are going to be the lesser of two evils versus the Asteri. And I know a lot of people have been commenting and telling me, Sarah would never make Rhys the devil. She would never make him the worst prince of hell. Like, she would never do that or whatever. And you guys can go back and watch my Reese's Apollyon theory if you want. But versus the Asteri, she's going to spin it so that the princes of hell are the good guys. I don't think she would ever let Reese be bad. But if she made him a villain, but like a villain on the good side, or a villain who wanted to change or whatever, even though he's still super shady, this would literally make him morally gray instead of redeemed villain or terrible hero, which is kind of what he is right now. But yeah, Reese has an orrery, the Autumn King has an orrery, and the Astronomer, who I also think is Koshi, has an orrery. Cassian doesn't mention how many planets are on Reese's, just that he made it when he was young and that he didn't really care about it, but Asriel was fascinated with it. And then the Astronomer, his was like a huge grand scale one. But I find that amusing that a Fae King and a Death God and a possible Prince of Hell all have the same thing in their offices. Now, I'm only on chapter 65. I just reached 65 in House of Sky and Breath. I just found out that Baxian was Danica's mate or whatever. So, I don't know if, it delves into anything more about the planetary systems. I'm kind of hoping that it does. Just because I feel like we would need more information before CC3, but that's just me. Here's hoping for the best.